All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to season 3, episode 4 on the Fortinet series with your host here, Chris Dorn. As always, Israel Quintero is joining. How's it going, Izzy?
Howdy.
Awesome. And joining us today again, Rebecca Bro, our channel SE with Fortinet. How's it going today?
Howdy. And she came back for more.
She did.
Dun, dun, dun.
And Naman Aliwala, a system engineer with Fortinet, has joined us to talk about some ADCs from Fortinet today. So how's it going, Naman?
Doing great.
I got to enunciate a little bit better. So thanks for joining us today. All right, so we've whipped up a couple discussion points here, and I've been hounding Rebecca and a couple other people and been searching wide and far and got a collective understanding and insight into like some of the positioning of this product that we want to talk about. But a lot of our customers, especially from the XenTegra side, are long-term ADC, application delivery controller customers. They have it in some regard in their environments. Some of them have 2 vendors. I think we have a couple customers with 3 or 4 different vendors that they have inside of their organization. And, you know, I wanted to talk about the Fortinet one because I see a ton of value in a pretty robust and, you know, modern and mature Swiss Army knife that I think can provide a lot of value to our customers. So we did a little bit of Googling and we saw January 30th by Ben Zimmerman. He whipped up a nice blog article talking about bot or not. You know, Fortinet enhances the application security with advanced bot protection service. And this is one of the pieces that we've been seeing a lot in the industry where folks have their application delivery controllers. They might be using it for one specific purpose. It might be B2B API kind of integrations with other partners that they have. It might be delivering virtual desktops. It might be, you know, for their own websites. And there's a lot of different ways and components that we can work the ADCs and the web development and delivery that we see with these appliances. But I think what they all have in common is that there's a ground set component here that I wanted to take a look at and then talk about some of the more advanced features that have developed in the market over the past couple of years where we're trying to keep that traffic away from being on-prem. So vendors like Fortinet have gone above and beyond to help secure the investments and the experience that the users have. So wanted to say thanks for being here before we kind of dive into it, but I'll share the link to the blog post that I was referencing as well. But I wanted to give a little bit of overview to our listeners here about the FortiADC and the FortiWeb that accompanies it or can stand alone independently, of course, and just see where kind of Fortinet has this in their portfolio and where you might have seen any success stories and maybe even some kind of special deployments. So without further ado, let's jump into it a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
well, thanks for having us on again. We love talking with you.
Of course.
I mean, WAF and ADC, we've had them in our portfolio for a really, really long time. So, I mean, I think it sounds like you guys and your sellers are really proficient in this space and you're familiar with a lot of the requirements that customers might have leading to it, but we've had some pretty exciting enhancements, you know, for those that find ADC very exciting. And you touched on one of them, the enhanced bot protection, which, you know, we use AI in a lot of different things that we do, and that's coming into our bot protection services as well. None of us are kind of new to the idea that bots are out there more and more. I mean, every report I see, it's just the proportion of traffic online these days is ever increasingly bot traffic. And some of that is good, some of that's not so good, right?
Yeah, you like the good traffic. What you don't like are the bots sitting out there trying to make your users and B2B apps and API integrations slow down. But
right.
Yeah, very good point. You know, the security portfolio seems to have grown quite a bit as far as the next layer of security we can apply to these. bring it down to the beginning for folks that aren't super familiar with ADCs, as a light overview, it's your application delivery controllers. You're basically load balancing your web servers and your APIs and different components that you have inside of your organizations. You think about like Amazon, for example. I know they're a big ADC shop. I know Apple is, and you think about all the little servers. They're tens of thousands of them that sit behind virtual IP addresses to deliver those services. And you have health checks on top of them that can tell if a server crashed or maybe is overloaded, and you direct your users to ones that are less utilized so that their performance is super acceptable. And these can be on-prem, they can be in the public clouds. I see the FortiADC is supported in AWS, Azure, Oracle's cloud, Google's cloud, your own cloud or physical on-prem. So, there's tons of options here. And I think there's a pretty good conversation point. I think there's a lot of value that isn't discussed, I think, enough around the FortiADC and FortiWeb pieces. So lots of good options that we have here. So
yeah, I think one of the things that always seems to set us apart is that we're concerned both with availability and connectivity and security simultaneously. And so ADC and our WAF are the same, right? They're designed for that dual requirement scenario. Naman, did you want to touch on anything in particular?
Yeah, sure. So at
Chris
times,
and I have been chit-chatting, but
oh, no worries.
So at times it becomes a question of what the use case is, right? Whether to choose something like a dedicated WAF product or the application delivery controller, right? For most customers, I'd say choosing the ADC is the kind of best route. It's what we would call the Swiss Army knife of delivery controllers, right? It provides you not just the WAF component, but it adds on load balancing, which is kind of an important factor, especially when considering things like geo-based kind of routing to the best resource or disaster recovery. WAF is really a stronger offering if we're looking for specifically two protocols, HTTP, HTTPS, right? And if we're looking for something that's going to catch on to behavioral analysis or AI, machine learning, to specifically target things like 0 days. When that's the criteria you're trying to meet, a dedicated WAF like FortiWeb is going to be the stronger offering. But for 95% of users, I would say the ADC is a very, very compelling offering.
So what would you say when a customer has just virtual machines, right, but not a website? Will you go with the ADC or the web or WAF?
In most cases, the ADC is going to be better, especially if we're trying to use health checks to ensure that we're not kind of losing connectivity or possibly loss of revenue due to an outage.
So but if they did, no, go ahead.
No, please continue.
I was going to say, so if they had both a website and a virtual, then you will recommend both the WAF and the ADC?
Personally, I would recommend the ADC far and above. It's almost everything that you need. There are very specific requirements for 0 days, or there might be some sort of a very secured resource in the back that requires an added extra step or an added layer of security. In those cases, FortiWeb is a very strong offering. You can pair it with ADC or use it in case or in lieu of ADC. But if that potential cluster requires something other than HTTP or HTTPS, really that's kind of out of FortiWeb's wheelhouse. You're going to want that ADC there.
Awesome. Cool.
Meaning that FortiADC can really steer traffic and load balance for more or less any protocol.
That's correct.
So that's where that Swiss Army knife kind of comes in. It can handle direction, I guess some kind of layer of content switching. Maybe you're looking to save on address space.
So Chris, you mentioned something early on that had me curious. You had said that some of your, because you guys have been in the web application firewall and ADC space for a while and kind of consulting your customers in this regard. And you mentioned some customers have more than one solution in there in this space. And I'm curious what you attribute that to. Are there specific requirements that they go with one or another? Are they regionally diverse and have different requirements by region? Or what do you think is driving that? Because that's interesting to me.
I think some of it kind of comes back to what the underlying service they're trying to deliver and the support side of it, where there might have been specific vendors or it was more of a prepackaged kind of solution that might have been delivered to them. And they're like, no, we support front-ending our application. You would see it with like something like Epic in the healthcare industry quite a bit. You become certified with that vendor to have delivery of that application that they develop and more or less support at the end of the day. That vendor doesn't want to hear about, because you have it load balanced in a certain way, or there's some kind of gateway involved that they've never even heard of, because there's quite a few of these out there in the marketplace, as I'm sure you're aware of. But they try to lock them in a little bit to some degree. So I think that's an important piece that we've seen over the years coming into play. On top of that, you might have had just an organization with some rapid growth, and as they're consuming and ingesting other businesses, some of those applications might have brought over not only the application itself, but also the way that it was delivered. Because I as a technology person, I kind of see this as that access layer. It's pretty important you might have that application, in the data center or in these clouds floating all over the place, but it doesn't really mean a hill of beans unless the user can get to it and they get to it fast, and now get to it fast and securely. So I think some of those kind of came over through attrition from other businesses consuming again and partnering with other organizations. Some of those might have been in that kind of regard, but I think even all the way down to, you might have seen some old Radware and some maybe other similar kind of load balancers that came over just from the ISPs. They changed their links, and the companies that kind of put them together there, their packages might have placed a certain product that might have been there 5 years, might have been 10 plus years. You stumble across some of these pretty old ones sometimes too. It's pretty funny.
So do those customers usually have an eye on consistency across their different deployments that might have different products in them? Because that would seem tricky to say the least.
Well, yeah, they do. And, they want to have that consistent, not only experience, but support from those vendors. And I think, somebody who has unprecedented kind of support and customer feedback from somebody like Fortinet is a pretty important factor, because we're seeing some disruption in the industry from that regard, where it's hard to get help, or it's like even to look at it at a very high level could result in a pretty long kind of support ticket queue that is causing customers to become somewhat dissatisfied with the level of service that they're getting from the vendor of choice there. So I think to answer your question, yes, very much so.
Yeah, we see that, and we see that also when they start to deploy either some or part of the environment in the cloud. Then that seems like a big chasm to jump across with some level of consistency, desired.
Oh, sure,
see that too, or yeah.
Well, I think that kind of angle that you're presenting there is pretty important with like your FortiGSLB cloud offering too, to help standardize and get that same experience regardless if they're landing in the on-prem data center or they're leveraging something that might be more geo-located to that user, within the region that they're accessing the application from. So that's why having that one platform, I guess, across, multiple hosting environments is pretty key there. And based on the portfolio offerings that you have here, that's not a problem at all.
Well, so what are some of the new features that is now what the ADC has been involved with? That I know ADC is becoming a new big topic, right? Because different vendors are different, they're changing different things. And like, what would you guys say that y'all's ADC is becoming a big topic?
So part one, as far as kind of the new features in ADC, we'll say that that's going to be the FortiGuard, data leak prevention, and kind of a restructure of the licensing. So we went from kind of 2 offerings to 3. And the third tier, that's going to be your AI based. So the 2 new AI features are going to be your advanced bot protection and the threat analytics platform. So those are going to be kind of the new components that are bundled in with ADC. And they're kind of going to provide you more for your money in that regard, as far as the feature sets that you may benefit from, or that you could kind of deprecate or kind of reduce third-party tools, or leveraging other platforms, or kind of a mixed bag of, non-communicative products to provide you a platform. And it kind of borrows some of the feature sets from our FortiWeb offering as well. And you could say that these are going to be kind of some differentiators for us.
Yeah, for
Great.
both of them, they start to kind of build in additional AI intelligence into it. So it's not just, looking at individual incidents. It's looking more kind of aggregate and across the different incidents. So, looking for behavioral patterns and things like that, because we know that a lot of the bot activity is becoming more and more human-like. So we need the AI to really analyze multiple of those in conjunction to see where the patterns are emerging. We just, as humans from a manual process, we'd never be able to keep up with that. And so that's kind of underpinning, that capability is underpinning these 2 new offerings that Naman just mentioned. And then in addition to that, we continuously roll out for those that like the hardware flavor. We continue to, roll out the next generation chipset appliances and things like that. I think you guys are, I'm sure you've touched on it many times in the past. I know we did in our last one briefly, but we produce our own specialized ASICs chips for a lot of our different appliance form factor devices in many pieces of our portfolio. And so FortiADC appliances have gotten their next rev of some hardware upgrades as well. So again, kind of under the hood, a lot more power inside of these units.
Oh, that's awesome.
Any other goodies, Naman, that I'm missing, that we're missing? I think those are the couple of big ones.
No, you nailed most of the big ones there. Really, beyond that, it's really just kind of identifying where a specific model for ADC might fit for your use case, especially when you're talking about the ASIC. When we're talking about, say, SSL acceleration, right, for offloading that decrypted process, that also is something to kind of factor in when you're picking the right sized device, right? The smaller devices, the entry-level models, though they provide more than adequate throughput for layer 4 and layer 7, they're also going to be using, say, something like software-based acceleration, which is not going to be as efficient as our ASIC-driven products. So that is something that should be taken into consideration as well, especially if that's going to be something we need to leverage to keep a certain level of performance. You're going to want an ASIC chip that's specially designed for that process.
And what model will start at the 400 level?
Correct. The 400F would be the kind of model where the ASIC chip is kind of specially developed for those that hardware appliance.
Yeah, that's
Awesome.
an important factor. Yeah, because that's where like the SSL offloading is presented to the ASIC chips about the 400 level.
Yeah, it's going to be right at the 400 level, and you're going to notice a substantial improvement in performance using the dedicated ASIC over software-based, either with the smaller ADC devices or the virtual machine instance.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And your folks should have access to, well, all of, we publish our data sheets and everything that have all the, the details, but of course, if they need some guidance on selecting one model of another, you know how to reach out to all of us. So our teams are always there to help kind of fine tune design discussions and everything.
Oh yeah, always. It's good stuff. And I'm just kind of scrolling through some of the appliances myself here. It's been a hot minute since I've had investigated the actual physical hardware, but at the end of the day, I always like looking at the hardware, getting my hands on it. You know, once a lot of stuff started going virtual, you know, like 7-8 years ago, got you know, kind of missed that a little bit. So really like getting back to the actual physical appliances and checking that out.
Yeah, and I think that's the big difference, right? I mean, a lot of us are getting used to that VM route, but it's becoming a little challenge, because if you want to do that SSL, right, acceleration, and your actual appliance that you have and your VM is not going to be able to do that as well. I mean, that's where the hardware will come into play to be better to go with the hardware than a VM.
Yeah.
It gets tricky, but I mean, it's still the option that, depending on what you really want to do and how much resources you want to put in.
Oh
yeah. I mean, it always comes down to where do you need your infrastructure, right? Does it need to be virtualized or not? And if not, what are your capacity requirements and scaling requirements? But, you know, in our environment, we support both form factors, and they're interoperable. So for those customers that have a mixture, they don't have to go the route of 2 independent vendors for that if they choose not to.
Well, one thing I'm very interested. I mean, I'm aware of it, but I know a lot of our listeners are not familiar with FortiFlex, and I know FortiADC is appliance it fits the bill for the FortiFlex. I don't know if Rebecca or Naman can talk about that.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Did you want to take this, Rebecca?
You start. Go ahead. Either way.
All right. So just to kind of give you the one-liner, FortiFlex it's not a product. It's more of a licensing platform.
Yep.
And it's designed for either MSSP offerings or for what we call the enterprise. Really, what it's designed to do is to kind of pool a level of credits, right? Money converts to credits. Those credits are then used dynamically to spin up any number of VMs or licensing for hardware that you may already have deployed. And it allows you to kind of run them on a day-to-day basis. As far as what it costs, it's typically going to be right in line with what the typical 1-year license would cost. But if you don't need a year's worth of licensing for a particular hardware, this is some sort of a dev environment, then it makes more sense to just use what you need to use and save the rest of the credits for something else.
Well, the only reason I brought it up, guys, is because as it's an option for different clients out there that they don't want to pay for that now you have that capability of an MSP to be able to do that for you, right? So it's a good way, or a good thing, that if different clients are out there and really want to talk about it or partner up with this option, I mean, we can always go in deep dive and talk about those different options.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the Flex is a big piece for especially the like seasonal retailers where they got a burst, you know, towards the holidays. But
yeah,
you know, they come back down a little bit after that retail season and maybe shift some of those credits over to another security component of their Fortinet fabric. Is that a good way to kind of look at it?
I think that's probably a really appropriate use case. You know, the concept is consumption-based licensing that you can kind of spin up and down, as you mentioned. So, you know, that certainly gaming season of various sorts that have, you know, during playoffs, all of a sudden they have, you know, dramatic increase in capacity requirements, that kind of thing. So, and then there's a wide range of services and support that can be paid with via the Flex tokens. So it provides some versatility there. You still want to figure out what kind of, at the start of the day, what product do you need, what level of, you know, capability, whatnot. But the services or software capability might be able to use some consumption-based, really suitable when the requirements or scaling up and down is fluid, right? It lets you stay on top of that and just pay what you need, pay for what you need.
And that flex licensing, that's administered from the FortiCloud?
Yeah, it's part of your portal, and
Okay.
we can help size it out as folks get started. But basically, it's almost like a debit card, if you will.
Okay.
So,
Sure.
you know, we can help estimate what a good starting amount might be given what the particular customer's needs are, but then they can kind of draw from their pool of tokens when they need to. And there's even automated like orchestration behind the scenes and things like that for spinning up and down in the cloud that can automatically trigger tokens and whatnot. So that's an interesting topic. So I think it makes a lot of sense in certain cases. Most customers are still ordering the traditional way with a regular, one year or multi-year renewal, but we definitely know that there's either some customers or some verticals where this kind of dynamic requirement is super helpful, and they don't want to have to pay kind of upfront for the max capacity if they'll, very rarely use the max capacity. So
no, gotcha. Another one of the components in the cloud to help make our lives easier. So not only securing, but helping to administer.
Yeah,
so,
try to make it convenient consumption. So
yeah, easier is always better, and add that flexibility component to it. We've grown to not know life without it. So I guess kind of as a recap, we got the FortiWeb and the FortiADC. Those are typically going to be managed and hosted by the customers themselves. And then we have the security portfolio that kind of lives in the cloud. And Fortinet's basically saying, hey, we're going to protect you from bots and malicious traffic and DDoS and those kind of disastrous kind of security events that can happen to you before it even gets to your ADCs. We're going to keep that traffic up in the cloud. Then we chatted about it for a moment, but you also have that FortiGSLB cloud, which I was pretty impressed with that, the way that you kind of do it, because I've come from an old way to do it, which was kind of a little bit cumbersome, where you had to delegate or sub-delegate the domains down to the appliances and basically become like authoritative DNS servers for those domains that you were trying to provide GSLB for. You guys kind of have that up in the cloud, which seemed kind of similar to like maybe a Cloudflare or something like that was like health checking back down to the organization and didn't necessarily require a lot of that DNS legwork. Can you guys talk about the FortiGSLB component a little bit? Maybe elaborate a little bit on how I kind of described it, or if I was even going down the right path.
No, you nailed it pretty well, Chris. Really, the GSLB is something that works very well with ADC or web. Really, it's purpose designed for more or less 3 use cases. One of them is going to be that DNS servicing. So it can function as your kind of primary authoritative DNS server. And it supports all the traditional DNS types and zoning. It also adds DNSSEC. So if you don't necessarily have that in play currently, you might be able to benefit from having that added layer of security. Now, the other kind of component there, the lesser known one, I guess, if you will, it also provides the ability to load balance client-based VPN. So if you wanted to use it as a standalone offering, kind of veering away from the ADC conversation, you could use it, leverage it with our FortiGates, for example, to provide load balancing for VPN users without having to have them switch VPN from one to another or a backup server. It becomes seamless.
Hey, I can tell you that we see that still as a very prevalent deployment type, for better or for worse, for many factors, usually outside of the team's control or even to some point the organization's control. The VPN or access to those gateways for VPN access is still pretty prevalent. see that quite a bit. So that's a really cool point to note there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And kind of that third use case, and we'll bring that up again, kind of drilling into the FortiGate use case, would be inbound SD-WAN load balancing, right? So our FortiGates or FortiADC, for example, they provide outbound load balancing for multiple circuits. But there's no real way to handle that inbound balancing. With GSLB, you can leverage it to provide inbound load balancing. So now you have kind of a means to load balance multiple ISP circuits, both in and outbound.
I did not know that. Okay, that's pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Well, learned something new today. That hey, I can hang it up for today. That's what I look for to make my day complete. Very cool. So I look forward, and I guess as we kind of start approaching the end of our time here together, guys, I'm going to dive into the Accelerate this year and really look to see if I can get as much as I possibly can out of the platform. I can't say I had any hands-on as a consultant deploying the product line, so I got to get it in my lab to some degree. So I can't wait to start playing with it more. I did some of the training to get some of the book smarts on it, but that's two different worlds. I don't. Yeah, exactly. I figured I'd get a giggle. Yeah, you don't want me doing it quite yet. I think I know how it works because I read about it. But so, where do you is there any particular verticals or industries that you see this in, or do you see it usually with a Fortinet fabric, or have you guys seen it as kind of a standalone deployment mixed with other vendors and organizations? Is there any examples around that you might be able to chat about?
So I'd say for specifically the standalone offering of GSLB, which it's completely available that way, I do see it periodically within the SMB markets at times, and most often it's that use case with the VPN load balancing. It becomes a pain point for a lot of organizations that are maybe not fully developed, or they're in a hybrid kind of environment and they're not 100% sure how to enhance that end user experience. So we do sometimes position it there. It does have a lot of plausible use cases within traditional hybrid deployments, even more developed organizations. Like if you're leveraging AWS's Route 53, for example, there are some advantages to using something like GSLB, especially if we're using ADC in those regards. That one-click kind of agent deployment that ADC has with it, where GSLB is technically a standalone. You control and configure it from the FortiCloud platform. But once it's configured, you have that one-click button within the ADC platform, and it ends up becoming a very seamless experience. Then it kind of takes that, and you can take the health checking and take that to a different level where you don't necessarily have that capability in a solution like AWS's Route 53. The health check, it ensures that if you have multiple servers to load balance, either distributed or otherwise, that's something that you need health checks to determine whenever a request comes in. So we do see that a lot in those cases.
Yeah, I think I learned about one customer deployment last week when I was having dinner with some of the Fortinet team. It was a VoIP provider, and they had FortiADCs, and all the SIP traffic was kind of determined based with the FortiGSLB cloud. And I was like, man, that sounds pretty awesome. And they said, yeah, and they developed, a lot of those apps in-house themselves, so you guys were helping with the steering and delivery of those services, and how touchy VoIP is. So it's either do or die in that world.
No doubt.
So I think we got a pretty good intro into the Fortinet's FortiADC and FortiWeb platform and some of the accompanying cloud services and that provide additional security and availability. And then any points that you guys want to tack on before we wrap it up for the day?
I think it's our usual. We take a platform approach to a lot that we do. You can deploy ADC and our WAF independently, but boy, does it get amplified when it's in conjunction with other technologies, because they share intelligence between them. They share responsiveness between them. So, again, kind of getting back to what we talked about before, anything we can do to make it simpler for these, customers to actually function in their desired business space, and take the technology, the heavy lifting of it off their plates. We're happy to do that. So
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate you guys being on the podcast today. But it's one of the items I love talking about, the application delivery and just the way things have evolved over the past decade or so with it. It's ever changing, but it's so ingrained into these organizations. It's
yeah.
It's a
It's
major
probably
part.
not the sexiest topic ever, but every interaction, either with employees or users to any application, has to go through some conduit. And so ensuring that is a smooth and secure piece of the puzzle, boy, that's huge, because it touches every individual that interacts with that company's business. So, not sexy,
yeah.
but super important.
Oh yeah, they take it for granted. Even time services and DNS or Active Directory availability and all the things you can load balance with them. Like they just take it for granted that it's there and it's healthy. This is one of the things to make sure that you go where you need to go to get what you need, and you get it fast and securely. Excellent.
Thanks for having us on.
No, thank you guys. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, guys, we really appreciate it.
Oh, it was absolutely a pleasure for working with you guys.
And Aman, it's always great talking to you again. Me and Aman worked at Fortinet when I was there, so great talking
Aman's
to you
got
again.
some history. He knows where some of the skeletons are in Israel's closet.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's always been a pleasure, guys. So I couldn't talk too much about this because this is not my forte. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, it's something we can start working on.
That's right.
All right. Well, watch out for if you're still trying to go to Accelerate, reach out to us here at XenTegra. More than happy to try to get you there for as little, next to little or no cost as possible. And I hope to see you guys out there. And if we don't, catch us on the next podcast. So thanks for listening.
Clock's ticking.
That's right. All right, everybody have a good one. We'll talk to you soon.